Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another video. My name is Supatees, and in today's guide, I'm going to be going through Balanced Druid versus a Mistweaver Monk and a Shadow Priest, and also an Arms Warrior. Bit of a peculiar composition, but you do see these individual classes quite a lot on the ladder, so it's important to understand the tactics that you want to implement against them, even though this set of combination is a bit peculiar. So, as a balanced druid, you have a powerful crowd control known as Solar Beam. You combine that with Mass Entanglement to hold the healer in place and silence them for 8 seconds. When facing a Mistweaver Monk, they have Wave the Crane that you need to be paying attention to, and it lines up perfectly with your Solar Beam Mass Entangle combo, so they can break out of it. Also, the Shadow Priest has a spell called Mass Dispel that can remove your root and effectively allow the Mistweaver to move out of your silence. So with that in mind, you want to make sure that you're using crowd control onto multiple members of the team to deny access to these abilities. I'm playing with a Holy Paladin and an Arms Warrior. We're playing a Repentance, hyper-aggressive Moonkin composition, which is a bit peculiar for the meta that Moonkins are currently in, but we're going to see it all play out here shortly. So the first part of the game, you're aiming to get your dots up onto as many targets as possible to start generating astral power. Your healer, the Holy Paladin in this instance, is chasing the Mistweaver. If he runs out into the open, we look to switch to him and force pressure. We manage to get Way of the Crane, and that's an important spell. Now he won't have that to get out of a Root Solar Beam. However, with Way of the Crane up, it is unlikely that he goes down, so now your main focus should shift a little bit more to defense. Keep an eye on your healer, maybe look for Cyclones moving into the future. They're really denying my ability to stop that with these spam mind controls, but in this position we're looking to stabilize and reposition. Against the Mistweaver, you want to try and get on top of them. In this specific setting, we've been going after the Mistweaver whenever he rolls in the open to avoid Repentance, and then switching to a different target if he doesn't roll out to avoid it. In this position, I'm basically 1v1ing the Warrior while my Warrior chases their healer. This creates pressure in 2 locations, forcing the Mistweaver to come back and heal, or forcing the Warrior to get off of you and run away. Both of those instances, one will grant you more damage and maybe allow you to execute a kill. The other one will stop damage and allow you to elongate the match. So with this split strategy on 2 targets, whenever the Mistweaver gets away from me, I focus damage on the Warrior. He starts to panic, the Mistweaver has to deal with being attacked and crowd controlled at the same time, and with the split pressure, it works quite effectively. Against the Shadow Priest, you typically don't go after them because of an honor talent called Edge of Insanity, which basically means they take 20% less damage. They also heal themselves quite effectively through their Vampiric Touch and Vampiric Embrace, so with the specific comp that we're playing, if we don't kill Shadow Priest in the opener, we're not likely to kill them, so we focus a little bit on him, but not too much. In this specific instance, my Holy Paladin has finally chased down their Mistweaver Monk for crowd control. In this instance, he opted to not use mobility to avoid it, which means he sits crowd control and we switch to a different target. There we could see the Mass Dispel. I used Solar Beam to interrupt Mass Dispel to make sure that Repentance didn't get removed. The reason I didn't use it on the Mistweaver is because he now has Way of the Crane. So with that cross crowd control, we netted Life Cocoon and Dispersion, 2 powerful defensive cooldowns. So you want to be reactionary with your Solar Beam. It's not all the time on the healer. Sometimes you'll use it to stop a crowd control break from one of the partners on the opposing team, while your partner sets up the crowd control on the healer instead. Now, without our burst cooldowns, and without any crowd control, we're on the defensive, so we focus on being in bear form when our healer is crowd controlled and just maintaining dots throughout. I try to look for entangling roots and I kite as my paladin is still crowd controlled. But now he's used Sacrifice, which redirects all the damage to the paladin. So I want to be out of form casting spells. In this specific instance, I looked for a clone to try and get a trinket. And now later on I can use Clone to deny a kill potentially. And our main objective here, oh, the backup objective is that the Mistweaver will run out of mana from using Way of the Crane too frequently, or we can bag in a crowd control chain with a Hammer of Justice Repentance, or the Mistweaver rolls on the map and we switch to him. And it's these 3 strategies that are always rolling in the back of my mind when I'm playing. In this position, I'm dangerously low on health. We've used a lot of powerful defensive, so I'm going to chill in bear form and use Barkskin to allow my paladin to recover to full health. After we've recovered to full health, I try to look on maintaining my dots and generating the most amount of astral power. I then switch my solar beam to the monk, and the priest casts Mass Dispel, however overlapped with Way of the Crane. It's unfortunate in this position. I should not have used the instant Lunar Strike. The Mistweaver repositioned with Chi Torpedo on the Repentance, and I ended up breaking it because Lunar Strike does area of effect damage. Basically the only spell you can cast whenever a healer is next to your kill target in a crowd control that breaks, Star Surge, Moonfire. That's it. Don't press anything else because it's probably going to break the crowd control. You want to be aware of that. That could have forced a kill or a life swap potentially if I had not broken that crowd control. And the objective there with Solar Beam on the monk is that he'll use Way of the Crane to break it, and he wants to punch stuff when he's got Way of the Crane. He's got to get up close and personal. When he gets up close and personal, he exposes himself to Hammer of Justice and Repentance, and it was my error to break that crowd control. That's another strategy that's going through my back of my head throughout this fight. But still remember the backup strategy. If the Mistweaver runs out of mana, he can't activate Way of the Crane, can't get out of crowd control, can't boost his damage, and can't top his team. So that is inevitably the goal point outside of these other options that we have. And then during our moments without Solar Beam and without stuns, I focus on being in bear form, looking for cyclones, and kind of supporting the team in a utility role. Now that I have Incarnation off cooldown, that's my hardest hitting spell, I really want to start getting things done. I've got that Mass Entangle, I've got the Solar Beam, the Mistweaver has no Trinket. This is a good position to try and win the game. So I go for Root Solar Beam, and then if he uses Way of the Crane and rolls in here, he spends all the rest of his mana, he exposes himself to crowd control, which we start the chain with an Intimidating Shout. Unfortunately breaking to dots, I believe, with Incarnation up. It's unfortunate. This crowd control chain could have been a lot more devastating if we'd held on to that Intimidating Shout. Regardless, we do manage to pull Life Cocoon for the main reason that the monk is trying to extend his mana as long as possible, but he's basically in that critical range where he cannot use many more Way of the Cranes, if any at all at this point. They're in desperation. They start to switch to my healer, and because I know they're in dire straits and so far behind, I just spam clones, spam roots, give as much breathing room as possible to the Holy Paladin, so hopefully that he can survive, because as soon as we recover from this situation, we are basically guaranteed to win. So with the triple Entangling Roots and the triple Cyclones, I stall it long enough for my Paladin to eventually get to safety. This warrior does a good job of staying on target, and Divine Shield is ultimately forced for their relentless efforts, which allows my Paladin to recover and now potentially to get aggressive. We've got a situation where there are no trinkets for the healer or the Shadow Priest, so we go for a swap to the Mistweaver, knowing he doesn't have Way of the Crane, and try and burst him down in a double stun. The Shadow Priest prevents that by gripping him away and then portaling away from the charge. Still in this position, we're just trying to create pressure on targets and trying to burn the remainder of the Mistweaver's mana. With Avatar activated, I use Barkskin. This is usually a fair trade with the Warrior's Avatar cooldown, as it reduces the incoming pressure quite significantly. In this position, Way of the Crane gets activated. They're basically on their last legs. We just need to start focusing on surviving, so going into bear form and using Frenzied Regeneration is going to be your best option. After you've slowly recovered, you may want to try and look for Cyclones, but in this position, my Paladin has Avenging Crusader up, which does a ton of healing, so I don't really need to Cyclone with that powerful cooldown up. I'd rather just tank damage, soak it, and let the Paladin top off the team. After we've topped off, start getting aggressive, start casting. They switched off of me. Whenever they're off of you, you do want to try and maximize your damage and cast your empowerment. So Solar Wrath, usually not Lunar Strike. It's a bit too slow. You're only using that when you get instant cast procs from being attacked. Maybe you would use it a bit. In this position, I'm still trying to buy breathing room. I'm using Mass Entangle on the Warrior to deny him from connecting to my Holy Paladin, and my main focus is still keeping dots on everything and banking off a win from mana should we not be able to punish a misplay on positioning moving forward. Obviously, Dampening is now in play a minute in, which reduces healing. He has no mana. We still have that significant lead, and he can't use Way of the Crane anymore. So the next Solar Beam in 10 seconds when I have Mass Entangle is most likely to force a Trinket or a Mass Dispel. So we need to try and coordinate with our team and deny that Mass Dispel when the crowd control is then available. They're forced to use Die by the Sword, another powerful defensive simply due to mana and Dampening stacking up, which is kind of your backup plan no matter what. It's inevitably going to happen. And we're forcing more cooldowns like Life Cocoon, and because I'm not the target, I'm just hunting after this monk, looking for that Mass Entangle Solar Beam, and then I want to try and coordinate a stop on the Mass Dispel, but it was out of line of sight. So he wasn't able to. Mistweaver uses his trinket to break out of the crowd control. Now we just need to survive a bit longer, but they have managed to hang on just long enough to get decent counter pressure onto my paladin and myself, so I try to help him out with a renewal, but now we have a stun into a fear, and if we can crowd control chain off of this with a repentance, it's likely to be the end of the match. We don't even manage to get the repentance, but the damage is still quite devastating, and because the Mistweaver has basically no mana to work with, he can't get the warrior out of execute range, and my warrior can net the kill. I played this composition and had a lot of fun with it because the playstyle is a little bit more forward momentum than a lot of the other balanced druid compositions, and playing with the repentance build and everyone kind of getting in the opposing team's face was a nice change of pace for Moonkin overall. So if you're interested in trying it, I definitely recommend it. Other than that, thank you for tuning into the video. I hope that it was of some assistance, and subscribe, click the notification bell. I would really appreciate it. I'm doing my best to try and get run-throughs and play-by-plays of a game a day, and outside of that, I'm looking to expand the channel as well, but that's my main goal at the moment. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you next time.